Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We are going to be going beyond the ordinary in this show because we have with us our guest, the author of Exopolitics, Alfred Webre. This is a book that is actually world-changing and beyond. It's bringing us into alignment with the larger picture of who we are as humans, terrestrials, with the larger cosmic picture, if you will. Alfred is not only a graduate of Yale University as a lawyer, but is also a Fulbright scholar and has been involved in the Stanford Research Institute work of dealing with addressing the subject of extraterrestrial life and psychic phenomena. He was appointed to work there from a project that he developed that the Carter administration okayed and approved and stood behind for human beings to understand more about our role in the larger universe and what this whole phenomenon of UFOs is really all about. So, such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Yes, thank you, Mitchell. I'm very, very, very happy to be here today.
I'm so glad. Alfred, you are a man on a mission. And it's really heartening for me to be sitting here with you too to discuss this, because the subjects at hand that you develop in this book are of such vital importance to our corner of the universe, but even to its further reaches. And these are subjects that most people don't even give any thought to. We're so preoccupied with life here on Earth, as we should be, but without regard to our larger cosmic frame and picture. And you are really helping to bring that greater awareness to the foreground. So, to start with, thank you.
Great. Well, you know, I like to call it the ABC future, and A for Armageddon.
Oh, yes.
The world ends in fire. B for global warming, the world ends in ice, and C being the exopolitical future, and that is a positive future whereby humanity and the Earth transition peacefully in a soft landing to our next evolutionary step, which is to become aware that we live in a populated universe and that to claim our universal citizenship.
And identity.
And identity, exactly. If we look at the scientific model, the canon, the scientific model of the 20th century was that all intelligent life ends at the geostationary orbit. Essentially, it had not changed since the 16th century. It had not changed since the Middle Ages. It had not changed since the Dark Ages.
It's actually just another function of the geocentric point of view.
Exactly.
It's just a symptom of that.
Right. And the exopolitics model, which is the inverse of that, is that we live in a highly populated universe. It's a model for the 21st century.
Yes.
That we live in a highly populated universe, which is filled with intelligent, evolving civilizations operating under universal law with some form of governance systems mediated by universe politics.
Yes.
And we on Earth are just becoming aware of this. We're an entry-level civilization. And so exopolitics serves as an interface between our civilization and other intelligent civilizations in the universe. It's a functional bridge.
Definitely.
And
but I think it needs to be said, Alfred, from a historical point of view, that these ideas are actually not new at all, but they would have been found not in the ordinary domains of science, but in esoteric science. For instance, the initiatic science that we have from the Real Mountains from Bulgaria, as an example. And I mentioned to you earlier the work of Omra Mikhail Ivanov, who understood this. The work of Gurdjieff, who understood this. The work of Rudolf Steiner that understood this. The essential works of Theosophy that understood this. It was always buried. The Upanishads understood. They made reference to galactic beings, chariots of fire of Ezekiel. If you think about it, there are huge numbers of historical antecedents to this whole domain of the interface, the exoteric, if you will, exopolitical interface of human life with the larger cosmic life.
Oh, this is
we forget about it and we fall asleep to it.
Oh, sure, and we go through repetitive cycles on the planet. I like to call Nikola Tesla, the Serbo-American scientist, the original father of exopolitics, because you can go back to the New York Times of January 23rd. Serbo-Croatian. So sorry.
Go back to what?
You can go back to the New York Times of January 23rd, 1901, and you will find that the Harvard Observatory, the Lowell Observatory, reported a 70-minute a beam of light from the planet Mars, and this was taken to be an intelligent signal from the planet Mars.
Outer reaches,
that from an intelligent civilization, and so Nikola Tesla, at that time, as you know, he was working with the financier J.P. Morgan, and he had just invented alternating current. So, and then Tesla wanted to get J.P. Morgan. He said, "Look, we don't even have to have circuits. I can derive energy from the cosmos, and I can transmit it anywhere in the world for free." J.P. Morgan said, "But I won't be able to meter it and charge it."
What are you, crazy?
What are you, crazy? So, for that reason, we spent the entire 20th century with these oil wars, and World War I, World War II, and we're finally coming about.
And everything in between.
Yeah, exactly. But to get back to the story, in 1902, then Tesla went out to Pikes Peak, Colorado. There are photographs of it. He built a Tesla machine, and he communicated interactively with the intelligence that sent the signal that the Lowell Observatory picked up in 1901. And Lord Kelvin, who invented the Kelvin scale, was the eminent scientist of that day, came to New York, and at a big banquet here in New York, defended Tesla and said, Nikola Tesla is the first to have achieved interactive communication via technical means with an extraterrestrial civilization that's on the planet Mars. And that was at a banquet here in New York, reported in the New York Times, reported in Collier's Magazine, 1901, 1902. So he's the father of exopolitics, which occurred here in New York City, reported at a banquet from the top of Pikes Peak, which incidentally, the Hopi Indians consider the top of Pikes Peak, Colorado, to be, quote, the center of the world. So we keep on repeating all of these cycles over and over and over again. And so now we're once again...
Now, why is it that he went to Pikes Peak? What was there that attracted him to make the communication from there?
He chose Pikes Peak to build his Tesla towers. To then communicate back to the intelligence source apparent intelligence source on Mars that had sent a 70-minute beam of shaft of light.
That the Harvard Observatory
had
observed.
Observed.
Right, I see. Oh, and so, this is interesting. So that suggests that that Tesla intuited, sensed that of all places to build his Tesla machine, it was there.
Exactly.
Just corroborating the sacred native intelligence.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so what you've opened up here, Alfred, is phenomenal because it shifts the terrain, so to speak, completely. And it opens up the conversation from being all terrestrial, which we are largely based, of course, to a larger galactic conversation and what's going on. So you are involved in ISIS. You are involved in the subjects having to do with the weaponization of space.
Right.
What are the implications for human beings? What does this all mean? You've talked to me also about the conversations that have taken place between our military officials and extraterrestrial intelligence going back to the early 50s.
Right.
What proof, what verification do you have of that? And what does it all mean for us?
Yeah. No. These are key questions because exopolitics is really the new political science of outer space. So this is a way, you've asked key questions about our recent past, say the past of the permanent war economy of this 60 plus years now, since the end of World War II. And what exopolitics does is it reframes that period by bringing in the extended universal perspective.
The extended brotherhood.
Exactly.
If you will.
Exactly. And so from that frame alone, there's an intimate relationship between the issues of war and peace, the issues of armament, the issues of planetary husbandry, the issues of the effect on the biosphere of nuclear weapons and ionizing radiation. And two very simple anecdotes which are highly documented by whistleblowers and by researchers. You can go to our Exopolitics information websites, exopolitics.com and exopolitics.org, and you can research these. They're all set out in
so we know,
academic.
Just to encapsulate it for our audience who may or may not heard of these kinds of things, that there has been a dialogue going on between extraterrestrial intelligent life and terrestrials.
Exactly.
In particular, military terrestrials and political terrestrials for many, 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 many years.
Exactly.
I mean, forget about going back to the Mahabharata and all of that, or the Old Testament. Let's just stay in recent history.
Yeah.
It's been going on for at least a good 50 or 75 years.
Yeah. And to put it in perspective, what occurred from a universe society point of view is that with the detonation of the atomic weapons in the nuclear tests in Nevada of the U.S. and then the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki bombs, that sent out a signal to galactic society that this became a planet of concern. And the reason is that nuclear weapons not only threaten humanity and the DNA of all living things on this planet, but they threaten the dimensional ecology. They are a threat to the dimensional ecology of universe society, so that's why nuclear weapons are prohibited throughout the galaxy, because they have detrimental effects on the DNA of all living things, and we live in a highly regulated universe. We humans might think, oh gee, there's nobody here, we can foul the nest, but in fact it's a highly populated universe.
Just the opposite.
Just the opposite, because we've been in quarantine. So there's that old Firesign Theater record, everything you know is wrong. It applies here. from the 60s.
That'll date us.
Yeah,
Alfred.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so a couple of quick examples, historical examples. On the night of February 20th, 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower, this is all documented, reportedly met with extraterrestrial ambassadors from an ethical, upper dimensional extraterrestrial civilization. And there's differences among the civilizations once you get into exopolitics.
Yes.
Like they're different nations, different races, different interests.
Ethnic groups.
Yeah,
what
ethnic
have
groups.
you.
It's like you encounter
Sure.
in political science, anthropology, history.
Sure.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
And the
But
upper
what's the language group? I keep wondering about what's the language that the interface, like Eisenhower meeting with these, do they have a way of downloading English or so?
Yeah, and just to get into that, I'm sure you'll be fascinated because of your interest in consciousness. It's highly telepathic. These individuals communicate at the telepathic level.
Sure.
And the communication then was a request formally that the U.S. abandon its and abolish its nuclear weapons program, not only for the sake of the Earth and the biosphere, but because it was a danger to the galactic and the dimensional ecology. It's something, and the U.S.
That's a beautiful phrase, dimensional ecology.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and the U.S. responded nine days later with the Bravo test of exploding a 15 megaton hydrogen bomb. So that was the response.
When will they ever learn, huh?
Yeah, that was the response of to this particular extraterrestrial race. Now, following that in 1954, another extraterrestrial race, a different.
So we don't know if that was actually Eisenhower's reply. Actually, I would think that it would not be. My sense of Eisenhower, not that I knew him well, was that he was actually a very peaceful man and a peace-loving man, and I do not think that that would have been, and a thoughtful one, that he would have had a response such as that.
Well,
The only thing that we could think is that there were powers that are behind him, as there are powers behind the current administration, and always have been from time immemorial, that are actually pulling the strings.
Yeah, and that reflected in Eisenhower's departing speech about the military-industrial complex, and also the nuclear technologies industry. If you go from uranium, it's a vertically oriented industry, and the same interests that own the uranium mines, the Rockefeller interests, the City of London interests, the Rothschild interests own the uranium. They own the nuclear power interests through General Electric. They own the nuclear weapons factories. They own the defense industries. And they own the governments, the nuclear powers, because they buy the presidents, and they buy the ministers, and they buy the secretaries of defense through their lobbying contributions. So it's a vertically oriented industry, the nuclear industry. So, and that's in direct contradiction
A new meaning to the phrase vertical integration.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And that policy is in direct contradiction to the suggestions and directives of advanced extraterrestrial civilizations.
Not to mention even human common sense.
Exactly. and biospheric and imperatives, ecological imperatives. So here we have an exopolitical conflict between the galactic governance and advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, who are constrained somewhat by non-interference ethics up to some point, and not interfering, because obviously these advanced
There's that line.
exactly, and so
Yes, exactly. These advances can be used, of course, for the good or
Yeah.
for the destructive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now you have a history once you get into these studies, for example, and this is through the number of the Disclosure Project witnesses. This is a project that first came forward at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. 20 or so out of 100 Disclosure Project witnesses. I myself was a Disclosure Project witness. My co-director, Dr. Carol Rosin, the Institute for Cooperation in Space.
Who I interviewed some years ago.
Exactly. And Carol was a Disclosure Project witness also.
Tell the etiology of that and who she worked for in government and how all of this kind of came tumbling forward.
Sure. Well, Carol has a very interesting history. She originally was a sixth grade teacher who had an experiment whereby she would have her school children be in space. Make that they were in space and write to world leaders and begin to get in that. And then she
look at the world from that perspective.
Exactly. And then she was introduced to Dr. Werner von Braun, who was a whistleblower in Germany. He headed up the German space program during World War II. However, he was a whistleblower then and attempted various escapes from the Nazi camps.
Wasn't he hired by the United States government?
Yes, and
Later.
and he was brought over to the U.S. and he has essentially built the U.S. space program. He was also reportedly present at Roswell and saw the
in New Mexico.
Yes, and saw New Mexico. So he brought Carol in as his sort of alter ego, sort of,
Yes.
and she would give his speeches, and her testimony at the Disclosure Project was his whistleblowing again, that there would be an attempt after the collapse of communism, because there was a requirement for a permanent enemy. First, there would be a false war on terror. Then, and after that, they would try a kind of a war against the asteroids. This is in order to justify the weaponization of space. And finally, a false war against the extraterrestrials. The evil ETs are trying to take over the Earth, which is a reversal of what the extraterrestrial role is. The extraterrestrial role amongst the advanced ethical extraterrestrials is in fact sort of a helper role to help bring this planet through what could be a period of species suicide and or ecocide, in which we would blow ourselves up in a nuclear war, or we would seriously damage the biosphere. Now the biosphere, this is a universal commons, and the human race does not have title to it.
That's a very important point.
Exactly. So
no one owns the Earth.
Exactly, and so that was Carol's testimony there. So Exopolitics, for example, then reframes what has been the conventional history, which is, well, let's just think about Earth. This is just like, the history of me is just what goes on in my house, and there's nothing else but what goes on in my house. And all of a sudden, oh, gee, my house is in a city,
pretty big,
which is in a country, which is on a planet. Exactly. And now it's not only on a planet, it's in a galaxy that's full of inhabited planets, and they're organized.
One of billions of galaxies. Oh
right.
My God!
Yeah, and they're very evolved, and so following this meeting with the advanced civilization in February of 1954, another group of extraterrestrials, as far as we can determine from the best of research. The small grays approached the U.S. and entered into secret human extraterrestrial liaison programs around which advanced technology, including advanced time travel, teleportation technology, and perhaps advanced propulsion technology, were transferred. And there were two conditions to this. There were treaties signed, like you sign treaties between countries. One condition was that reportedly that at a certain time these agreements would be made public. Well, that hasn't been honored. And at a second time, reportedly, at a second condition was that this technology was to be made for the benefit of the biosphere and for the benefit of humanity. In other words, teleportation. Not just
for the select few.
Exactly. And not for military
use.
Intelligent purposes, for the purposes of having military hegemony over the earth. That's not what this game is about.
So it's not good to mess around with people who are that much more intelligent than you. So how is this going to balance out?
Right. It's a very interesting turn of events, because now, reportedly, the extraterrestrials that were party to these treaties, to the second set of treaties, have come forth, and we'll be discussing these at public conferences and at a forthcoming press conference at the National Press Club, and have said, look, the U.S. government... You've gotten yourself
into some amazing venues, Alfred. Phenomenal.
Yeah, and say, look...
As it should be.
And saying, look, we're a party to treaties which the U.S. government has broken. And what's really important here is that these technologies were meant for the good of the biosphere, the environment, and humanity. Because there's no reason to have these concrete highways pushing around hunks of iron with explosions polluting the atmosphere, having wars over oil,
the whole fossil
fuel, nuclear, where nuclear power plants or a low-level nuclear war against the population and the environment. Depleted uranium is a low-level nuclear war, is a war against the DNA, has been adjudged to be omnicide, ecocide, and genocide by an International War Crimes Tribunal in Tokyo. And so now what they recommend and will be proposing is going forth with a truth amnesty process, like they had in South Africa at the end of apartheid. The truth and reconciliation. We won't go for retribution. We'll go for
restoration,
restorative justice, and that is, let's just take this period of history as an aberration. You were tempted, you bit into the apple. Okay, come on and just confess it before the world. Sign here, and these technologies are now released under what we call open source agreements, not under patents. Nobody's going to become a quadrillionaire on them. Directly, we'll put them under open source so that everybody gets to be a potential entrepreneur to say, this is how I want to apply this technology. And then instead of creating hell on earth, we can begin to create heaven on earth.
That's our game.
Which is as it should be. So
this is all, to me, kindergarten.
Yeah.
It's just, as you say, when you bring in the technologies, like you said, of teleportation, time travel, and all this, then we're talking about, this is graduate level for us.
Exactly.
But this other stuff of this remedial level of a fossil fuel paradigm is just, it's so old school.
Exactly.
Listen, I just thought this was fabulous. You're bringing forth such fabulous information, so useful, earth-shattering in the best possible way.
Thank
you.
I'd
love to have you as a guest again.
Absolutely.
And we'll carry forward.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mitchell.
It's my pleasure, Alfred.
Great.
Thank you for your good work.
Absolutely.
This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. I hate to end this conversation, and it's not ended. It's just a new beginning. Thanks so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.